bought games from like bachelorette.com, cock ring toss. We
Oh
played
my gosh.
talking about morning wood,
My
and
wife is like,
stuff.
for the love of God, can you just shut up? Like, I understand. I just got out.
My penis still works, so I must not have low T. Like,
all right. Hey, welcome to 1D Talks. Got a exciting guest. Miss Ali Gilbert is with us today. She's the queen of men's health. So excited to have you on. A lot we can unpack today. Tons and tons of content that you've been pumping out there. And I know you got a pretty big event coming up in November we'll talk about. So really excited for our viewers to get to know you a little bit and learn more about this wonderful thing we like to call men's health. So
I did not name myself the queen of men's health, by the way. I forget who said it. I think it was on another podcast, and they're like, you're like the queen of men's health. And I was like, I'm going to put that in my IG profile because that could be like a good thing. So that's how that came about. It's not self-proclaimed, but people like to use it. So I'll run with it.
Hey, there you go. So how did all that kind of, how did that get started for you? I'm just curious that, a lot of really intentional content around the topics and stuff. And what got you started on that path?
So yeah, I know, because it could be weird, like, why a woman takes such a huge interest in men's health issues. And I always say it's because I have a history of daddy issues. But the real reason is I majored in exercise science. And just like everyone else who's majoring in that, you want to train athletes. So when I graduated college, I went to Springfield College, where pretty much almost everybody majors in XPhys. So I graduated and I was like, all right, cool. Where do I train athletes? And I worked at a place called Velocity, which was like a major sports training company that basically got NFL guys ready for combine, stuff like that. And that franchise ended up folding. So I stayed in my hometown of Greenwich, Connecticut, which has a lot of very wealthy guys who can train and afford to train. And so I was working at a commercial gym, and a lot of these guys played golf. And I was like, cool, I know nothing about this sport. Like, I played soccer in college. So I was like, all right, well, how hard could it be to, like, hit a ball that doesn't move? It's really fucking hard. Like, I took lessons. I bartered with tons of pros in the area. And I was like, teach me this. This is a sport. Guys can afford to train. And there was a certification in it. So the title is Performance Institute, was a golf fitness certification. So I became the go-to golf fitness person in Connecticut. And that brought me all guys as a clientele. And I was like, all right, these guys are asking me about nutrition. They're asking me about how to get abs. And they're fronting with, well, I just want to hit the ball farther. And I was like, yeah, okay, sure. So I realized that a lot of these men's health issues and topics and stuff like that were not talked about openly, but they confided in me to talk about it. And that's kind of how it all developed. And a business coach of mine was like, you should really take this whole like men's health stuff and just run with it. And that was in 2011. So here we are.
Oh, that's awesome. It's funny because there's some similarities. I knew some of them, but so I'm actually the opposite, right? So related to what you were talking about men's health, like mine, I kind of nerded out on women's health for a couple of years when I was in the medical space, because I had some family members that had some different women's health issues, and went really deep on unpacking, all types of testing related to, their 24-hour cycle, hormone cycles, as well as their 28 to 32 day cycles, and what happens at different times, and all this fun stuff. And my wife is like, for the love of God, can you just shut up? Like, I understand. I just got out of the ovulation phase and my progesterone's going up, estrogen up, and that's why you think I'm cranky, or whatever, I'm like, well, I mean, so it's actually pretty funny, because it was like the opposite. And then with golf, I can't think of anything more stressful than this tiny ball in this tiny hole and all this grass everywhere. My wife's a really good golfer, so that's like the worst. It's like I didn't pick up a club until my mid-30s, and I'm like, this sucks.
Dude, it's like so infuriating that, like, literally. And were you an athlete?
Yep.
Yeah. So if you're an athlete, you can't hit this ball that doesn't freaking move. It's annoying, but then it's addicting, because you're like, I must conquer that.
Yes. Oh, and then one out of every 40 shots, right? You actually get a hold of it and you're like, all right, I'm starting to get this. No,
Yeah.
no, the ball knows, it knows that you're about to give up, and then it just, will take off for you. And
Yeah.
that's what happens. So, no, but I think it is really important though, because, like as you mentioned, right? Like a lot of people are not talking about a lot of these issues, and getting some of those things out there. It's something that, I've seen a lot across a lot of different ages and stuff and things, but, so you've kind of taken it not only just from, sounds like not only from training, but now you're doing like educational seminars and events and things like that. How did that kind of continue just to, build up from the start in 2011?
I always knew I wanted to do public speaking because
Hmm.
I was always fascinated by the conferences I went to, all the fitness conferences. I was like, this is really cool. I want to get on stage one day. And I was speaking on golf fitness topics. And as that slowly morphed into the men's health stuff and I learned more and more about it, I realized nobody was talking about this, especially a woman talking about men's health. So my personality is very unfiltered and crass, I guess you can call it. It's what my
Sure.
husband says. You're so crass. So it just naturally comes to me to joke around. And I realize that diffuses the awkward nature surrounding talking about morning wood and testosterone and ED and stuff like that. So I brought that into kind of my performance, call it,
Yeah.
and would present on that and then diffuse the awkward nature about it. And so more and more men would be like, okay, so how do I get my testosterone checked? What do I really have to think about? Because most guys think I don't, I'm not in the risk category unless I'm over 60 or,
Right.
my penis still works, so I must not have low T, like all these things. And I'm just like, actually, you should start getting tested in your 20s just so you have a baseline.
Right.
But a lot of guys also 20s, early 30s had a lot of sexual performance issues and they thought
Mhm.
they were completely alone. And the
Yeah.
fact that I brought that up, they were like, oh my God, like I thought that was only me. I thought there was something wrong with me. And I was like, this is like a nation or worldwide need
Right.
to understand this. There are women's health certifications, there's women's health conferences. There's no men's health conferences.
Mm.
There's plenty of medical conferences, and you may know that. Like, there's lots of organizations,
Sure.
but you have to talk about certain things.
Right.
And I was like, I want one that's like my personality. I want unfiltered. I want people to have fun. I want
Yeah.
them to discuss it and be amongst others that are going through the same thing.
Yeah.
So I was speaking at so many fitness conferences talking about the same thing over and over and over. And I would get cornered at like the social hour, like, Ali, like I've been dealing with ED and I'm 23 years old. And I'm like, you're not alone. Like
Right.
there's
Right. Right.
much of this. So I wanted guys to not feel shame with bringing that up and
Yeah.
not feel so alone and understand that, hey, there's other guys who deal with this no matter what their age. So
No, I think it's really cool too, because like looking at your lineup, I mean, I know we'll get into the Silverback summit you have coming up in November, but you're also speaking at Swiss in October, right? And is that your first time or second time? I
my first
don't.
time at Swiss.
Oh, nice.
So
Awesome. Awesome.
excited.
Yeah, we'll be there. I think we're talking a little bit off air about that. I know Justin is back. I don't know how many times he's been there, but I know he was there. I'm pretty sure it was last year and maybe even another time. But yeah, so it'll be exciting to have this topic kind of aired out there and put out there for people to talk about, because as you mentioned, like once you kind of break it with a little humor and just bluntness, then people are like, oh, okay, it's cool to talk about.
Yeah.
Um, I have to tell a little side story. So there's this sweet old lady. She's probably in her, oh gosh, I don't want her to get mad at me if she's in her 60s or 70s. I don't remember, but
Say six.
physician. We'll say 60s because it won't get me in as much trouble. We'll say 58. No, but
Yeah,
she's this physician and like all professional, the codon, the whole deal in her appointments. And she would talk about men's erections, and she was just like, so let me get this straight. She's like, so basically, what we're trying to say is you used to be able to cut glass with it, and these guys just go like, what did you just lady just say to me? And like we would all just die because we knew she's going to say something completely out of character, inappropriate. But then the guys would like, wall would come down, they would just open up with stuff, and then she could help treat whatever the situation was. And it was just like the complete opposite of what you think coming out of that person. So I think it's definitely a disarming way to approach it. So
You have to, like, people have asked, so how does this conversation like transpire with a new client? And I want to say back in the day, so like maybe 10 years ago, obviously people didn't know that that was my thing.
Yeah.
So usually it was a very Wall Street, this was back when I lived in Connecticut. So a Wall Street man, business guy, CEO, whatever, in my office, very, very focused type A on golf. And then somehow the conversation would go from golf to lifestyle, nutrition, stress, and then I would just
Mm,
like any sexual performance issues. And sometimes they would be like, no. But then other times they're like, yeah. And you could see the wheels turning. They didn't understand the connection. And
yeah.
it just became very easy for me to talk about it. But then it allowed them to be upfront about it in the future. And maybe if they weren't ready during that one time, but it's not like I shake your hand and I'm like, hey, Joe, what's up? How's your boner today? You
Right.
Nowadays, people will totally know what they're getting into when they work with me. They
Right.
know that I can connect them with the right people. Like they know what I'm about. But
Yeah.
initially, I was just like, I don't know any other way to go about this other than like, so any issues? Because bluntness usually gets the point across, especially with men. I
Hmm.
found the difference with coaching men, or one of the differences, being direct, being clear, and providing structure helps men kind of understand this is what I have to do. Tell me what to do. I'll do this. So with women, we want to know like the why. We want to know what might happen if, what might
Right.
happen when. So for guys, it's just like, tell me XYZ and I will do that.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting how it's so different. I mean, were you seeing, is it primarily what you see a lot of is more like related to ED, or is it some of it also kind of like premature ejaculation things that they're having issues with? Is there a mixture of what are some things, or you know, late arrivals, if you will? Like, what are some things you're kind of seeing across the board with men's health when you're working with your clients?
So I do ask that on my intake form too,
Okay.
because then they kind of get an understanding of I might cover that. And I will ask, how long has this been going on? A lot of it has to do with stress. And I think a lot of guys don't understand the impact stress has on their, not only their sex drive, but their ability to get and maintain an erection. And this is exclusive of any medications or any physiological issues that are causing it. So they don't tie the two together. So they
Yeah.
think, oh, I can get a boner. I must have high test, or the opposite, which is I can't get a boner, so I must have really low test. And I
Mm,
actually did a post on both those scenarios the other day because I was like, oh, there's a lot of variation in guys thinking one thing and it really doesn't associate. So the analogy that I like to use, especially for people in the fitness world, if you're going for a PR back squat, you're coming out of the hole. This is probably one of the most stressful things your body can undergo. You're holding your breath, you're turning purple, your eyes are bulging, you literally might poop your pants, and you're like shaking. Now, at that point, if somebody that you want to sleep with walks in front of you and is like, yo, Joe, let's go, kind of hard to switch gears and pop a boner at that time. So I tell guys that's the same type of impact that stress has in your body.
sure.
And then they're like, oh,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
think about COVID, like, you know, the bad word, like so many guys question their TRT protocol, question their testosterone levels, everything because of the mass amount of stress. And literally they're like, I have all these, ED issues and everything. And it was just because of their body being impacted. Like your body's threatened. It's not like, oh, we're going to go procreate because we feel amazing. It's
Right.
we're going to try and keep you alive. So
Yeah.
that's
And now, do you see a lot of your protocols? Are they a combination of like mental, physical, nutrition, and pharmacology, supplementation, all the above? Like, what is it? I know there's a lot of individuality there, but any initial things?
I think what differentiates what I do from maybe like a general fitness professional, I did train people for almost 20 years in person. And since we moved online, working with Merrick Health for telemedicine has been fantastic because a lot of guys don't like going to the doctor, uh,
Mm,
or they only will go if it's like a dire emergency. And so now I have very competent, intelligent professionals, and I know what type of recommendations will be given to my guys. So that is part of it. If they've not gotten labs done, or maybe they're considering TRT, then we go through that process. And then it's also understanding what is the goal. And a lot of guys are confused, just like anyone really. It's so overwhelming with the vast amount of nutrition info out there and training. And a lot of guys program hop, or they try something, or they think they know what to do. They're not just doing it. My approach, and I've labeled it GPP for TRT, GPP standing for General Physical Preparation.
Mm.
It's basically getting a guy very healthy and resilient before he goes on TRT, but it's something that someone would have to do if they go on anyway. So
Right.
regardless if you're on or not. And that consists of doing aerobic work, which most guys are afraid of, getting them lean so that they're in a body fat range, which is like 15% or maybe lower, where they're going to tolerate carbohydrates a lot better, lower inflammation. Then we go through hypertrophy, and then we just cycle through hypertrophy and strength in a healthy way, so that if they go on TRT, or if they're on TRT, then their body's going to respond a lot better, because a healthy body will respond. And so that's kind of what we do. We get a lot of guys who maybe aren't as healthy, or around 20-25% body fat or lower, and they either need to lose the body fat, or they came from the background of, I'm going to slash calories and increase my training, and now I feel like shit.
Right.
Fix that. So same process though.
Sure. Yeah, no, I think it's a great point, because a lot of people, they think it's the next thing, right? So like we obviously have, supplements at first Detachment, but then if they take it another step further and they're doing like a TRT or a pharmaceutical, or even for those who are using more black market compounds that are even stronger than a lot of those, they always think it's like going to outrun their a trash diet or crappy lifestyle. And it's just, so I think it's a really good approach to like, slow down, like, let's get you, healthy and primed for that, because I think a lot of people don't really think that way through, or there's a lot of places out there, like it's on the internet, you can get research chemicals, or you can go through clinics that maybe don't push the pause button and just, dish it out without kind of walking through some of those potential risk factors or best ways to prime it, before they start.
Yeah. I mean, when we were growing up, like we had message boards, but like none of the information existed. Like I had guys in the gym that I trained at that had like Anavar in their bag.
Yeah.
Like, they're like selling stuff on the training floor. We didn't have the internet to buy all this stuff.
Right.
That wasn't available, and the knowledge base wasn't there. And now you have teenagers trying to buy SARMs and asking about SARMs, and they're embarrassed too, because then if they do experience like sexual issues because of previous use, who out there is going to understand them and not judge them?
Right. Yeah, it's been pretty interesting over the last 3-4 years, like looking at different blood panels and things, and seeing people, to your point, that use SARMs, and it set off a lot of their natural signaling, and they thought, well, I don't take steroids because it's a SARM, and it's like, well, it still costs everything to shut down, and that's why you're trashed right now, because there's just nothing going on from their signaling, or like with the research compounds. I recently did a talk on the difference, and I'm all for like, do whatever do what you're going to do. Simply, even when it comes like our supplement company, we're like, here's the facts, here's the data, here's the research that supports why we do what we do. Hopefully, you buy from us, but that's okay if you don't. We just want you to know what it is. And it was the same thing. Like, if you're going to do these things, you just know these are some of the differences, but are you seeing a lot of people come to you younger and younger now, since it's been more accessible to get things, say, online, or different compounds that, younger guys have access to?
Our coaching is a little higher ticket. So I think some of the youngest guys we have are 26, 27.
Gotcha.
But in my messages, definitely I'm getting those questions. And if not, it's when they're in their early 30s and they have previous use, but they just kind of didn't connect the dots. Like I had one guy recently who said he felt his best on Tren. And I was like, okay. So give me the backstory on all of that. And it was all these different compounds that he was on at the same time. And so
Yeah.
we don't know what's what here. So it was like, let's clear the counter, start over, get labs done, see where you're at. Because then it's depression and anxiety and all these other symptoms that they don't associate that could be from that, but we don't know.
Yeah.
And of course they get scripted anti-anxiety, antidepressants and stuff like that just based on the symptoms. And so it's really, again, finding, providers and people and coaches out there that understand and are not going to judge. I mean, I do have guys that are like, is it okay if I talk to you about PEDs? I'm like, yeah, like I'm not going to judge you, you
Right.
know, and if you're a coaching client, I need to know. And that's something
Yeah.
we ask, is there anything that you're using for self-medication? Have you experimented with steroids, like, judgment-free zone or
Right.
whatever?
Right.
Just so they know that they can freely talk about it and it is a safe space and it's not something that we're going to scold them for. We
Right.
don't know, we can't handle it and we can't take the appropriate next steps.
Yeah, and especially if you're getting blood work, right? Because there's going to be things that pop off that you're like, you said you weren't taking anything.
Oh my
Again, I'm not trying to like, I'm not going to ream you. I just need to know, right? It throws off so many things. So
I had a guy early on, and like he was embarrassed to tell me he was on testosterone for some reason, and I'm like, bro, this is like what I do. So he gets his labs done, and I did like a Loom review, which is like, I just pulled up his labs. It's like a screen share recorded for those who don't know. So I'm looking through it, and it was the first time I had seen them, which I should have looked at them before I was on, a recording, which I'm sure I could have just deleted or whatever. So I'm like, how long you been on testosterone? Like it was obvious, like LH
right.
and FSH were like -0, like, it's just there's telltale signs. His testosterone was like, through the roof. And I was like, this is interesting. And so it was funny. And so he was like, yeah, I figured you would tell. And I was like, why didn't you tell me? And funny enough, he was actually proactive against prostate cancer that existed in his family history. And so many practitioners were like, no, if you go on, it's, of course, they all think it's going to cause prostate cancer. And I was
Right.
like, dude, I commend you for being proactive about this. And I totally understand why you would be mildly embarrassed because he physically looks amazing. So he was used to being judged. So,
Right.
but yeah, sometimes like, when certain things are also wacky, you're like, okay, this looks like NPP or DECA, like you could just
Yep.
tell.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. They always know. Or like one of my favorites too is like just the outrageously elevated liver enzymes. I'm like, okay, like, did you drink 3 cases of beer last night? I mean, like,
And go to
come
the
on.
gym.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. I'm like, this is a little high. And they're like, all right, well, yeah, I was taking this. I'm like, yes, exactly. Just let us know. This isn't, but yeah, I noticed like too, like looking at a lot of your, some of your, I believe it's a client pick. Let me just pull this up really quick because it's pretty impressive. So people know. Can you tell us a little about this? Please pop up this image here. What?
So that's Chad. He's been with me, I want to say 2 years almost. So the picture on the right, or sorry, the picture on the left is his first day with me. And I tell this story in all my talks. He came to me eating strict carnivore. It was like what I call the magic man number of 1,850 calories. So for women, it's 1,200 calories. For men,
Mm,
somehow it's like 1,850. And he wanted to get bigger but more shreddy and how it goes for guys. And I said,
sure.
okay, well, you're eating nothing. So if we diet you more, you're going to be dieting on like 1,000 calories. That's not the answer. And we had to increase his carbs so that he could perform in the gym and stuff. Cause I was like, do you feel good? And I mean, he didn't feel amazing. So when somebody's been that low carb for that long, you can't just slam them with carbs because their
Right.
body doesn't make the enzymes to digest it anymore. So we slowly added, we went up 50 grams, 100, 150 over the course of a few months. We tolerated or we assessed his tolerance, GI distress, any of that stuff. And it was pretty smooth sailing. He is like this cyborg where he just responds so well. And we got him up to almost, I want to say 3,200 calories. And he gained roughly 30, 35 pounds over the winter because he gave me the green light to let him gain weight or to help
Yeah.
him gain weight. Because a lot of guys don't want to because they think they're going to do it in a very sloppy way or they're going to like, dirty bulk and a lot of body fat. And he got really big. He lives in New Hampshire, so he was able to wear hoodies. His abs blurred out a little bit, but honestly, it wasn't as bad as he thought it would be. And so then when we started his cut a couple months ago, he was cutting at like his maintenance when we first started, which was crazy. And so that photo, he had just gotten out of the sauna and I think he was tanning. And I was like, dude, I have to post this next to your original photo because this is crazy. So
Yeah.
he is known, like his nickname is Action Figure Chad because he looks like an action figure. He's 6'3", I think. So in that photo, I think he was around 230, 226. But yeah.
Awesome.
And he's a physical therapist and owns a practice and is a dad. And so he's a really good guy. But it's cool how he's kind of transformed. And he goes to show, like, we all know what we're doing, but you can't really do it to yourself. And I've had my own coach for 5 years too, just because I don't want to deal with my own. Like, we overthink, we
Yep.
make rash decisions. Like, it's very hard. So,
Well, yeah, I have a good friend who's a really good coach, full client load, has had for a long time, and he actually works with Justin. And it's for that very reason. Like, I think people, not all people, but some, the value of the coach is not the initial plan they put you on. It's the progression and the ability to look at your pictures and look at your feedback and make the adjustments. Cause it's like,
yep.
we all have access to the same calculations. Like, I actually have a template where it's like, I can plug in I used to like volunteer to and work with high school athletes. So just cause of the mass production of it, I had to throw numbers in, spit out a BMR, and it said like, if I want to do this percent of carbs, fat, and protein, and these formulas based on, this many grams per kilogram, blah, blah, blah. And we can all spit out the same stuff. Right. But it's the adjustments, over time with people. And I think, like you said it, so well with Chad was, he wanted just to jump in and then cut back, which you easily could have done that. You could have had some templated approach with them and said, here you go.
Mm-hmm.
Let's do the simple math, this many calories negative a day, you'll lose this much weight, you'll be good. And then, but you had to work through it. Right.
And it's funny because like a lot of them, especially during the weight gain process, uh, they want to pull the plug. And I'm like, just hold for, a little bit longer. And same with, cutting, like if cutting doesn't go as fast as they want, or if
Yeah.
they feel, a certain way. And I'm like, listen, when you eat more carbs, you're going to feel fluffy. Does not mean that you gained fat overnight. You may have
Right.
gained fat over the course of a few months, but when you're cutting and you feel fluffy, it's usually because your body is reacting to the amount of stress on it because you're in a
Mhm.
deficit. You're going to hold more water. So don't make reaction type decisions. And they can't objectively see that. Like,
Right.
I do the same thing. I emotionally react to how I feel that day, or maybe what the scale says, or something like that. Guys are no different. They just don't talk about it the same way as women do. So, from an objective standpoint, my coach will pull up and be like, okay, you've actually dropped, we go in kilos, 300 grams over the course of the last few weeks. You're on track. Calm down, blah, blah, blah. So, and I
Right.
do the same thing to my guys. I'm like, calm your shit. We're on track where we need to be. You know,
Yeah.
don't weigh yourself if it's going to drive you crazy, but like there's no way unless you ate triple what you're eating now that you gained body fat in the last week. Just because
Right.
the scale goes up, it could be a million different reasons.
Right. No, it's a good point. It's interesting that you say that about men, because I have seen it a lot with women when they start heavier strength training and, they're retaining more water just as a response to that. And they're just like, this has caused me to gain weight and the foods. But so it's interesting to hear that with men, especially men who have maybe a little more experience with strength training and what it does. But I guess it does make sense. I guess there's no one immune to that their own little mind screws that they go through. Right.
No,
Um,
no, they just aren't as vocal, except to me. And then, it say they're lower carb, and then, maybe you give them a few days of higher carbs or a refeed, and then all of a sudden they, have that whoosh effect. that we all love. And then they're like, oh, and I'm like,
Yeah,
see, now your veins are back. It's not a freak out anymore.
exactly. And you mentioned your husband a couple times. Does he coach as well, or is he involved in the industry at all? Or
He's a physical therapist by
okay,
trade, and he does a lot of consulting for professional sports and works with some professional athletes. So he's not in the same industry, but we do speak at some of the same events as well. So we share some clients too. So
gotcha.
yeah.
Well, yeah. Tell us a little more about this. I'm gonna pop up your site here, just about the Silverback Summit. First, I got to ask where the name come from.
So, oh, that actually has a story. So that's really funny because everyone's like, why is your logo a gorilla? Um, so that gorilla is actually a custom drawn logo from a guy from Marvel who I had him do like 3 different versions of it. So I decided, like, when I started really leaning into men's health, I was like, you know what? The eggplant emoji is a very poor representation of men's health. Like, it sucks. And I
Mhm.
was like, you guys do not deserve to be represented by this purple vegetable that is not sexy. And
Thank you for that.
yeah, and I asked like the women in the audience, I'm like, ladies, you see 2 eggplants fighting, like that's just not a turn on. But if you see a silverback, like they have the V taper, they are jacked. Like if you ever gone to the zoo and
Oh
see
yeah,
like a silverback, they're huge. So I was like, that's gonna be my logo. And I started using the gorilla emoji. I got this drawn. And I was like, Silverback Summit just sounds rad. Like
yeah,
I just like it. So that's how that came about. And it's a fun story to say in all my lectures, like, this is how it started with the gorilla logo and blah, blah, blah. Um, so, then it also represents like, kind of strength and power and basically having an amalgamation of the medical industry and the fitness industry. And it's actually expanding where we've got, Rick Collins, who is the attorney for everybody
yeah,
in the supplement and fitness world. And, Bedros Koulian, he's my business coach, like bringing everyone together in the same room. But all of this stuff can be discussed openly with no filter. People can get the truth. No one's going to be judged. And honestly, I wasn't sure. Last year was the first year we put it on. And
yeah.
like, I'm not sure how people are going to take to it from like a social aspect. Are guys going to actually hang out with each other? Or are they going to go like hermit in their room? And these guys are all like best friends by the end of the weekend. And I was like, this is really cool.
Is
So,
it now? Is the audience all men? Or is there a mixture of like couples or how?
so this year is more men and women. So last year I opened it just to guys because I was
Gotcha.
like, I want them to feel like it's a safe place for them to discuss this stuff and blah blah blah. And I said female practitioners can attend, like TRT docs and stuff.
Sure.
And then this year I had spoken at some seminars that were actually a more female audience, which is rare for the fitness industry. And I was like, well, they're not going to come to my talk because it's about like testosterone and boners. And a lot of them came and they're like, we really want to understand the men's health side of stuff. And I was like, this is interesting. And I was like, you know what? I'm doing a disservice if I make it men only. And I realized a lot of men open up to me because I'm a woman. And if I didn't allow other health coaches, which are practitioners just like me, to attend, then that would just be kind of wrong. So I encourage the women who do handle men's health, who do maybe coach guys like I do, or want to get into that to attend to learn this stuff because there is so much about women's health and it's so openly discussed. As you know, women go on hormone replacement. No one bats an eye, but a
Right.
guy can consider TRT and he's cheating and on steroids.
Right. Yeah, it's really an interesting dynamic out there. Um, yeah, I thought I would share this too for everybody so they get a feel for the inside look of the seminar here. So let's pop this up. Whoop, wrong screen. Where'd I go?
I don't know.
Oh, my mistake here. Let me go back. So one of your posts here, we'll kind of pop over to that. There we go.
That was probably one of the games that we played.
Well, I just thought this was like, boners and biceps. It's pretty.
That was the name of my talk.
There you go. Look at that. Is that what's your name of your talk at Swiss going to be? The name of it? Have you come up with it yet? Is it too?
No,
Is
I
it
don't know the
secret?
title yet. I just kind of know like content and stuff.
Yeah.
But boners and biceps has been a title I've used before at seminars that will allow it. Some of them don't. So I'm like, this is my event. I'm going
I'm
to talk
doing it.
about whatever I want. But I actually like, I bought a bunch of things because usually, like when you're switching speakers and there's a bathroom break, there's like, you know, a lull in the room. And I wanted to make sure that everyone was comfortable and I broke the ice. So I bought games from like bachelorette.com. So we played like inflatable cock ring toss. We
Oh
played
my gosh.
twerking pong. We played like Dizzy Lizzy, and people won like really like crass prizes and stuff. And they loved it. Like it was so much fun. And they're like, yeah, I mean, listen, this is a very Ali event. Like I think at any medical conference, like if you did that, people would have a heart attack.
Sure.
I also wanted to break away from that standard because, you know, you have to be very professional, overly professional in the medical industry. And I wanted everyone to feel like themselves. So I was like, listen, you guys don't have to wear a shirt and tie to speak in if you don't want to. Wear and dress as you please, what makes you comfortable, because I want you to be yourself. So
It's actually fun. I'm gonna need to step up my game because I was the warm-up act for Justin to come on, and I was talking about peptides and like blood work and stuff. So it was, you know, a little more dry. So they had a they had like a bedazzled microphone, and they're like, "Oh, this one, you don't want this one. This is from the posing seminar we had here a month ago." I was like, "No, give me that one. I want it." So I like rocked out there with that. I was like, "All right, we'll get everybody's attention with this bad boy." So there's a bunch of pictures of me on Instagram where like people are commenting like, "What's up with that microphone?" And then one guy's like, can I get a shot of that?" I was like, "Man, do your thing, bro."
I have to find there's photos. So I had these plastic penis water guns that I was like sneaking into the pockets of some of the guys. Someone took one of them and taped the microphone to it.
Oh,
So the
nice.
Q&A, they're handing around it like a big dildo. It was great. And the guys, like the doctors are like, they got it. And literally it's very an anatomically correct, like from the color to the veins and everything. And they're just like, I can't take this seriously. I was cracking up. I mean, it was just, yeah. I mean, listen, it breaks the ice. Everyone laughs. You get people laughing. It's going to be a good time.
November 9th. I got to make sure I can clear my calendar. So that's going to be, I need to
Yes.
get down there. That
Yes.
sounds like a lot of fun.
It's going to be great. I mean,
So-
it's, you know, a lot of the people that it attracts from our different worlds, like it's just a good group of people.
yeah, no, that's cool. You know, cause again, for people, that don't know the Ali Gilbert, and again, we'll put this in the show notes, but, you got a lot of really good to the point, informative posts on Instagram, which I seen a while back before we had a chance to connect to have you come on the show. So you know, I definitely appreciate that. And I'd encourage people to check it out, but I wanted to pull this one up and just kind of have you talk through it. So we got this, I don't, you know, it seems like uh, you know, rinse and repeat, right? Like approach with any type of hormone management for men is like, well, you need HCG, testosterone, and AI, right? Or whatever the case is. So it's you know, can you kind of walk through some of this information and what you've, you know, what you're putting out there about the topic of estrogen blockers and kind of what happens with people there?
So this is one of the most highly debated topics, I think, in the TRT space. And like you said, I live in Florida now, and you literally can go to a clinic every 5 minutes behind the gas station, and they'll
Right.
script you anything. But also, the starter pack going out the door is HCG or
No,
Granada
it's
now.
yeah, now it's Ganaderol, yeah.
Yeah, TRT and anastrozole. And this came from the bodybuilding world, thinking that estrogen has to be suppressed and blocked, and there's no high estrogen side effects and stuff like that. And so one of our physicians, Dr. Jordan Grant, who's a urologist out of Texas, has done a ton of research on this concept. And I think one of the easiest ways to position it is using the analogy of women. So when women go through menopause and they lose estrogen, what happens? They get belly fat, they become prone to osteoporosis, insulin resistance,
Mhm.
joint pain,
Yeah.
low libido. A lot of that happens to guys as well. And he has found that the serum measurement of estrogen in blood is not necessarily accurate or reflective of what is in the tissue, because in menopausal women and guys, it's not an endocrine hormone. So it's like asking or trying to see how much money Bill Gates has by just looking in his wallet. So it's
Yeah.
not really reflective of the total picture. And
That's a great
so
analogy. Yeah, that's a great analogy.
it works, and that stuck with me. And this gets argued all the time because then guys think, well, I'm going to get gyno, I'm going to have water retention, I'm going to have all these issues. But that's really more what they've been told or what they've read. And when you look at the science behind it, a lot of the benefits of TRT come from the natural conversion of TRT into estrogen.
Yep.
When guys have low testosterone, they have low estrogen as well. And ask anyone who's completely suppressed or blocked their estrogen, they probably had
Miserable.
joint pain, they were miserable. Yeah, it's not a good scene. And so there's times, I mean, I'm sure you've heard all the horror stories too. I've had guys who had anastrozole not compounded, but put in the syringe
Yeah.
with the testosterone. They've been on 1 milligram a day. Like, they don't know why they feel so bad. So then they keep increasing the testosterone, which increases the estrogen. So they increase the dose of anastrozole, and it's this vicious cycle. So the argument there, or the debate there, is it ever warranted to prescribe an aromatase inhibitor? And that's what I'm going to have a panel discussion on at Silverback, because there's various views on this. I personally don't feel like I am the expert qualified person to speak on it. I'm literally talking about what I've learned from Jordan and the research that he has sent and everything.
Sure.
But I found it fascinating, and it makes complete sense. If guys come off their AI, they feel better, they have less belly fat. And then if they're on a correct protocol, meaning it's not one injection every 14 days, then they feel pretty good, and they shouldn't have to react and take other medicines to maybe symptom correct.
Yeah, it's a great topic. It's really interesting because when I was really going down the rabbit hole on women's health, I spent a lot of time, I'm not a researcher or clinician, so I'm reading other people's research, to your point, and looking at results, but it was looking at estrogen metabolism pathways.
Yeah.
And so understanding, well, wait a minute, this works in men essentially the same way. It's just a different amount. So, there are several micronutrients in that. Obviously, if a man's body composition lowers, they're going to have less aromatase enzymes generally, things of that nature, to where I'm like, if people are starting a treatment just right out of the gates and it's an AI and testosterone, but they were, whatever, 50 pounds overweight and inactive, it's fair to, and their diet was crap, and they made the lifestyle changes. And let's say it's 6 months later, 9 months later, and they're not getting their blood work tested again. Maybe they did need it. Let's just say for argument's sake, they did, but they might not need it, or definitely might not need as much later, because they could be converting less or metabolizing it that much better to where it's not really in your system as long. It's interesting how many people can oversimplify it, because to your point, there's a lot of different schools of thought out there. But understanding how the whole process works and spending a little time on that, I think, is important. I've seen the same thing in women, where in blood serum, there's seen this in several women, but they were producing a low amount of estrogen, but their symptoms were estrogen dominance. And in blood serum, you're like, well, your testosterone and estrogen's low, so we're going to give you some more testosterone. Hopefully some of that's going to convert to estrogen. We're going to raise that up. But it just made their estrogen dominant symptoms worse. Well, one of the things we found, this isn't for everybody, but in a couple of these specific cases, was if we improved estrogen metabolism, their estrogen dominant symptoms actually went down. And so they were able then to go back to their, because think of like a faucet, right? Like if it's blasting and, whatever, but if you have the bottom of the sink is drained and you just have the water dripping, eventually it's going to spill over. It may take a little longer, but eventually it's going to spill over if it can't clear. So I've seen this, I haven't seen a lot on that in men, but if the system works essentially the same in men, different levels, but that's something I've been really interested in seeing somebody explore that more, a lot smarter than me, but so I can, regurgitate their information. But it's just kind of where my brain went, was like, oh, that's interesting. So it's, and it's well known, as you mentioned in your post, like the cardiovascular benefits, as well as many others, is well documented. So why other clinicians are just posting it or putting that out there, I don't know. I don't understand.
Yeah, and I'm sure people will come at me, and that's fine, because like I feel that I've surrounded myself with a good amount of practitioners that understand how this works. And it's just fascinating to me because I'm just like, wow, this makes sense. And a lot of the works Jordan has done is also with guys with prostate cancer, and
Mm,
how typically guys who get diagnosed with that get chemically castrated. He has guys with active prostate cancer who are on TRT. And he talks about how that works, and how, you know, the problem with all these studies is that they're correlation based studies, not causation.
mm,
Shows the studies in his talks about how um, testosterone is protective for the prostate. It does not cause prostate cancer. And the saturation effect, and like all these things that get taken out of context when talked about in regards to prostate cancer and stuff like that, and why the origination of deprivation, androgen deprivation therapy, and all of that came about and stuff. It's actually fascinating stuff. I'm like, damn, no one talks about this.
right. Is that the speaker, Dr. Jordan Grant is gonna?
Yeah.
Is that who you're? Oh,
Yeah.
great. So, and he's gonna be at your event. So that's
Yep.
awesome.
Yep. He's awesome.
Yeah, that'll be an interesting topic. Now, was he at your first one too, or
He was. Yep. Yep.
okay?
Yeah. He's a killer. I was actually just texting with him before we got on, because one of my clients was
I
talking.
just saw your games. I'm sorry on your
What?
site. Your games on your site. That's awesome.
Oh,
Sorry about
yeah.
that.
One of my clients texted me. I think it was like some doctor he was talking to about estrogen, and the guy was saying that like estrogen only acts a certain way on the amygdala. I can't say it. But anastrozole does not completely stop aromatization. It only stops it a little bit, and dependent on the dose. And I was like, this makes no sense. And I so I screenshot that and showed Jordan, and Jordan's like, what in the fuck? Like, some of the concepts these guys sometimes make up is crazy.
Yeah, it's really it's really interesting. You know how they just will misread that or mis represent that. What other topics are out there that you see that's going to be covered at the seminar that maybe more people are? There's a lot of mixed information on.
Definitely hair loss medications,
Mm,
anti-estrogens. As far as like the medical stuff, that peptides, the GLP-1 drugs, the weight loss drugs, um, body dysmorphia, masculinity, erectile dysfunction, a lot of those stuff. On the fitness and nutrition side, it's going to be like the stuff that gets argued the most, which is going to be, what diet is best or what approach is best. Carbohydrates, keto, like all that stuff we can debate. I'm leaving a lot of that open for Q&A as well, but also
yeah.
aerobic conditioning. So my coach is actually going to be talking about aerobic conditioning and how it's not going to make guys' muscles fall off, and how men need it, and actually it can make you more anabolic. Hypertrophy, the best ways to go about hypertrophy for muscle growth, body recomposition. Like, I've literally brought all the heavy hitters in for all of these discussions. And instead of doing like 1 hour talks all day long, which I realized is fun, but then it gets old, I was like, you know what? There's so many topics like estrogen and stuff like that that get highly debated. Let's open that up for discussion instead of one person providing an opinion and then another person. We have the guys who actually discuss that clinically all day, every day, live, and we can, strategize. I'll have questions obviously prepared, but we allow the audience to participate as well. And then we have more debate style talks and panel discussions, fireside chats, or whatever.
Now, are you? I'm just curious too. Are any of these topics that are more controversial? Are there? And I don't know if this was able to pull this off, right? But are there people on opposing sides of it, or is it more like with the whole audience? What does that look like?
So there are opposing sides. And it's not because I didn't pick anybody saying, oh, I know this guy's on this side and this guy's on this side, and I'm going to put them at each other. They are all aware of each other's views. I don't think anyone is hard one way or the other. I think as far as using estrogen blockers, we definitely like, I know Jordan and stuff because he has the research. And I know there are others that maybe still use them and are open-minded as to reasons not to use them. Same with the hair loss medications. But overall, I think just best practices protocols like preserving fertility, which interventions to use for that, when to use that, is it needed all the time? Injections versus creams versus these new rapid dissolve tablets that they're on the market now. So
Yeah.
kind of like all of that stuff. I know the guys that are all coming have different approaches, yet a lot of very similar philosophies.
Oh, okay. No, that's great. And you mentioned hair loss. I think that's a really good work in one for the obvious men and hair loss, right? But the other is a lot of guys, I forgot to even mention this earlier, right? I'm sure you see this all the time, but just crushing with, like your finasterides, just crushing and having so many issues from that and not realizing it. It's like, yeah, your hair stop, you stop losing your hair if everything else is going to crap. So, and
Yeah.
a lot of it has to, I mean, I don't know. I'd be interested to hear your take on it, but I've seen some people still get great results with more of a localized application versus, oral. I mean, um, but yeah, is that kind of some of the topic where you're talking about is just different?
Because it's similar to using the anti-estrogens, which
Yeah.
block the enzymatic process. This is blocking an enzymatic process. And I think it's more in the younger guys too, where they're doing it preventatively. So they'll just
Yeah.
go on finasteride, not even knowing if they're genetically predisposed, but maybe they just, oh, if someone goes on TRT, which eventually I'll be on, they're going to lose their hair.
Mm,
They don't know the risks. They don't know the risk versus reward. You can buy it online. So it's really understanding, okay, well, if you don't want to lose your hair, then what is the best way to go about that? If you can go about that. If you're genetically predisposed and maybe you're going to lose it anyway, what is the attachment to losing your hair? Aside from like, yes, it can be very life altering for a lot of guys. There's a lot of options like micropigmentation and the way that looks right now on the scalp. Like it can look very real. Like you have a short buzz cut and stuff like that. So it's talking through those options. And
yeah.
are there any medications that are safer than not? Is low dose safer than not? So those discussions. And I think that that's important for a lot of the guys in the audience who are going to be both medical fitness and then gen pop or general population to be able to see that live unfold versus listening to maybe a podcast that might be one-sided and then
Yeah.
another one and then being confused. We want to kind of work through
It's
that.
it's usually like you said when the best information comes out of like respectful debate, right? Where it's like this, they're open-minded, but they have their views and they share it, and then they kind of say, okay, I could see that, and have you thought of this? And maybe the other person did or didn't, and so it's a best
Yeah.
way to capture that.
Yeah.
What is oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just
Okay.
because I'm going to moderate it too. So
Nice.
none of these guys, at least, I mean, I've known a lot of them for a long time. They're not assholes. Like if anyone starts getting out of line, there are things that we can break the ice with to cause everyone to calm down, take a break. I don't
Right.
foresee anything getting out of hand. I think a very
Of
healthy,
course.
strong debate can definitely happen.
Yeah, no, I was just looking at your schedule. That was what I was going to ask you. Why, because it's tentatively right now from 9 to 5, 9 to 3. And so is it each topic you plan? Generally, most topics you plan to have kind of that debate style uh, in the agenda, or
We'll do some formal talks. I have some guys that are fantastic storytellers, great speakers, who will be doing like 60-minute talks, maybe 45, 60-minute talks. But then it'll be a lot of panel discussion on those various topics because it breaks it up too.
got it?
Rick Collins is like, I mean, he has stories for everything that he's dealt with. He's a fantastic speaker and storyteller. And I have trouble like narrowing down what topic I want him to talk about. So I'm
Sure.
like, you're just gonna have to talk about everything because the guys who do the formal talks, which will probably be around 6 or 7 of them, they'll still partake in the panel discussions as well. But it's not
No,
gonna be
it's
like 10 people on a panel. It'll be like 3 to 4 guys.
no. I was just talking to a friend of mine recently, but that hired Rick for some consulting, and um, like you said, there were so many things he, as experience or stories, and this wasn't really like any kind of profound story, but the guy was like, "Hey, I'm getting these younger guys that are just taking all this crap and hurting themselves. I know they're going to take stuff anyways. I don't want to tell them what to take, but if they're going to do it anyways, I need some help with like wording it in a way that I'm going to help them not hurt themselves." Like he has a genuine compassion for these guys to help them. He knows they're going to do it. So he's like, how do I word that and not get myself in trouble to where I'm not, prescribing or telling them what to do? And he had some good advice on that and different ways to articulate that to where, one, he protects himself, but two, he's still, I want to say, helping people. Like if you're going to do something quote unquote unhealthy, then like, here's the healthiest way to do it or to mitigate a lot of those risk factors. Right. I mean, but it goes the same for any other poor lifestyle choice that a lot of people make. There's ways to mitigate against the risks that come with those. If it's smoking, drinking, whatever, right? Like, so it just, it was really helpful, I think, for him to have that topic, because he genuinely really cared about, trying to help his clients, but just felt kind of limited because of, the way to set it up. So is there any way you're guiding him on that, his topics? Is there anything, is he talking more like on the changes potentially in like telemedicine law or any of that stuff? I know that was a hot topic a couple months ago. And
yeah, I think, and I think he got burnt out on that. I was like,
sure, I'm sure he did. Yeah.
you're doing consults like every day with this. So I think that will naturally come up because the medical providers will be interested in it. I did a virtual summit in May. I'm actually doing another one in August, just so people can understand what the silverback community is about. And I did a bunch of in-person interviews. And so I was in New York and I interviewed Rick, and I was like, listen, I'm not scripting any of this. I'm just going to go and wing it with you. And he was cool about that. And we talked nothing about steroid law really. And it was all about masculinity. And almost we were like, this conversation is going to get us canceled. But it was great because it did have to do with like the future of TRT and body dysmorphia, and how, like, if men want to feel more manly or look more masculine, that is looked upon a certain way compared to if I wanted to transition to be a man.
Mm.
That was actually more accepted than if a man wanted to be more of a man. And then it's the conflict as to, well, who is right? Because that's very controversial right now. So we were talking a lot about that. And I was like, I did not expect this direction. And he's like, neither did I. But it was this like an awesome conversation. And he's talked about it a lot on other podcasts as well. And I said, Silverback, I would love to go into that. And I would love to go into pretty much 12 other things that you talk about.
Sure.
But, so for him, he'll do a formal talk. And I said, I want it to be like a story. Tell a story, stuff that you've done and experienced and stuff that you would think people want to know. And then when it comes to the panels and the other stuff, whatever comes up.
Oh, that's awesome. And so I just want to take a step back, because I see you popping up everywhere, podcasts everywhere, content everywhere, and you got your clients you work with, things of that nature. Like how, I'm just really curious, because we've done some seminars, and we're, looking at our educational content, like how to expand that would be effective with. I'm just curious, like how do you execute that? Because you got multiple speakers, a lot of personalities, a lot of logistics, I would imagine. Yeah, how do you execute that? I'm just curious to hear.
You hire people to help plan. So I have learned with men that nobody reads emails, nobody knows what's going on ever, including myself. So it's constant reminders, hey, we need your bio photo, we need your topic. Doesn't matter, I'll still get a text. So when is this? What is the, so having an event planner is huge, especially dealing with hotel venues and stuff like that. Don't want to deal with it. And then honestly, I'm still learning, because it's kind of like planning a wedding.
Yeah.
Not only the expense, but also the logistics that go into it. Because you have to think of like, all right, is this in a place like we're doing in Austin, Texas? I wanted a place that everyone from everywhere in the country could get to. So it's kind of in the middle.
Yeah.
Easy to get to from the airport. Yes. Like, is this a place that people would want to go? Austin in the fall? Sure. It's not like North Dakota in December. Cool.
Sure.
So a lot does go into it. It is so stressful that I'm like hoping as it grows, then I could afford to hire more people to bring on to be able to help plan it, because it's like something that I think that you can do alone the entire year and only focus on that. So
Yeah.
if I wasn't coaching or doing anything else, I could still be very occupied just doing events. And now I get, well, why there are wedding planners and event
Right.
planners that do this full time.
Yeah. No, it's a great point, because it's I appreciate you sharing that, because we have a few people in our network that are just amazing at planning and details, and every time one of us will forget something. And that's kind of the joke with Justin too, is like, I'll even text him like, I know your wife, I know someone else on our team, and I know it's in your calendar, but are you ready to get on a plane in 2 hours? Because it's like, I also know that, so, and that's mine, is I always forget something, like literally the shirt I'm gonna wear to talk. I'm like,
Oh yeah.
how do you forget that?
Oh
So
yeah. I don't put that past anybody. And we try to have everything like as, available as possible. Snacks, like anything,
I,
like in my speaker bags, I was like body wash, all this that, like anything they need.
I think it's really smart though, like you said, to have it in the middle of the country, at the time, because we're mainly Michigan based. We have some people in different areas of the country, mainly Michigan. But to your point, instead to host something like in a warmer climate or a nicer venue, I think would be fun. But lately we just been kind of piggybacking off of like other potential events and stuff like that, which has been fun. But yeah, no, I'm excited to see. We'll see you at Swiss, and then hopefully can check out the summit as well that you're putting on. But I know we're kind of up in time and you're super busy. So I want to wrap up with a couple rapid fire questions that we ask
Oh
pretty
boy.
much every guest. And then we'll unpack, we'll wind down the episode here. So, all right, couple questions. We call this shoot, move, communicate, just little fun rapid fire questions we go through. Some will be short answer. Some will be, feel free to elaborate if need be, but the first one is a little more broad. But what accomplishment in coaching someone has made you most proud?
Oh gosh, I want to say when someone says that they feel like themselves and their confidence has increased. The aesthetics are cool and all, but honestly, when
Yeah.
you change somebody's life and their attitude about how they show up in the world, that to me is very gratifying.
Cool. Good stuff. What accomplishment outside of coaching are you most proud of?
God, I don't know. I don't really do much else except go to the gym. I have nothing.
All right. We'll let you off the hook on that one. All right. Next one. One word to describe your seminar. What would that be?
Fun.
All right. One word one word to encourage men to have these type of discussions. What would it be?
Freedom.
Good deal. All right. Next one. If you had to miss one, what would it be? A meal, a night of sleep, or a training session?
Mm, I would say a meal. I'm very good at dieting because I'm a woman. Can't miss sleep, can't miss training.
All right. Good deal. Uh, can you share one parallel that you have between your seminar and just your approach to everyday life? What would it be?
I would say I don't take myself too seriously. Like, I use unfiltered because that's what people use to describe it. But it's kind of like I show up as I am.
Sure.
And I feel I'm very similar on social media and I am in person. So I want people to feel like themselves and I want everyone to have fun and be happy. And yeah.
No, it's great because I couldn't agree more. Just making it entertaining all will lead to the education too. So
Totally. Because otherwise it's boring.
right, right. No, it's awesome. All right, last thing, I think we all will know the answer to this, but I'll ask it anyways because it's on my list. Your current passion project. What are you most passionate about? What gets you excited? And when you
Definitely Silverback Summit.
Yeah. I figured that one, but wanted to ask it there. It's something we ask everybody. We talk about, one of our sayings is being all in. And so we like to see what are people all in
I
about
love
right
that.
now in their life. And so I think you already articulated that most of the time we're talking today, but wanted to still put it out there. So thanks again so much for joining the show today. We're going to have it all in the show notes, but if you want to maybe give a few shout outs to website, Instagram handles, things like that nature, where can people find you at?
Sure. Come to slide in the DMs on IG at the Ali Gilbert, ALI. I answer all messages myself. I love having conversations there. That's pretty much where all my content is. And then if you guys are interested in Silverback, silverbacksummit.com. That's it.
Easy enough. Well, for everybody who was viewing today, thanks so much. We're excited to have you. Be sure to do all that fun stuff, like, subscribe, notifications, and any questions you have, be sure to put in the comment section. We'll definitely reach out to Allie, try to get those answers for you. As she mentioned, I know she's really passionate about this. I'm sure she'll be happy to answer your questions. And that's all I have for today. So for everybody out there viewing, thanks so much. We'll see you. Thanks again, Allie. Have a good one.
Thank you, Joe.